I'm going to show how I made these small baskets using scrapbook paper. I call these gum wrapper baskets because this is the same technique we used when we were younger, and we saved all of our gum wrapper paper and folded them to do chains or baskets and things like that. You can embellish them when you're done. There's a lot of things you can use them for. You can make them shorter or bigger. I also came up with a square model of it, and I've been dumping stuff in that one, but you can do square or round. That's about all I've tried. This one I used cardstock and old magazines. This one's scrapbook paper. This one was made a long time ago with cardstock, and I was using a technique that I found online, and there was no way to finish this without gluing something else on top to hide all this stuff. So I was playing around with this the other day, and I came up with a design on my digital cutter, and I cut out these circles, and this will fit down in the bottom of the basket, and the joining strips will be pushed through these little slots that are cut in there. And then when it's all done, we'll come back with a smaller piece to hide all of that down inside of the basket, but we'll get to that later. So first thing you need to do is decide what kind of paper you're going to be using, and since I'm showing the scrapbook version of it, I'm going to be using 4 sheets of scrapbook paper for the body of the basket and 1 sheet for cutting the joining strips. I'll need a piece of cardstock to cut my circles out of, and tacky glue. This is some really good glue, Scotch tacky glue, and it dries fast, but it does give you time to reposition, and you don't have to wait a long time before you let go because it's tacky right from the first, so you don't have to hold it and wait for it to dry. I don't like hot glue for this project, or the glue sticks. They don't work very well for this project. You'll need just regular Scotch tape for one of the techniques, and you'll need some double-sided tape also, and a little popsicle stick to help to fold the pieces will help. If you're using old magazines or thin paper to make your little strips, you'll need to cut these 2 inches wide and 5 inches long. All of the pieces will be 5 inches long except for the joining strips. And the thinner paper needs more folds in it, so you decide which side you like the colors on, and you would fold this. It takes a little longer for this one because you have to fold it several folds in it, so you make a crease in it lengthwise like that, and you open it back up, and then you meet one of these sides to that crease mark that you just made, and then you do the same thing on the other side, and that will give us 2 clean edges. And then we flip this over, and you end up with this like this. So these 2 edges are clean. You don't have these little thin edges to the outside. You have these nice folded edges to the outside, and then you fold it in half again. Sometimes I'll kind of curve it like that to help all those layers fold, and you can also take your popsicle stick and help to crease that, because sometimes with more layers it'll get real bumpy right here and it won't make a clean fold, and later on when we get ready to join these, it'll be hard because the edges are not crisp. So you fold each of these 2 ends. We made a crease here, and then you fold one of those ends in, crease it, fold the next one in, and crease it. And see, that one I could tell the layers didn't fold correctly, so I'm going to use my popsicle stick. And then you fold it up, and you end up with this little thing with 2 legs. I'm going to call these legs. So that's the fold that you make for the thin paper. If you're using cardstock, you only have to cut it 1/2 inch wide by 5 inches, because cardstock, if you cut it to 2 inches, you're going to end up with these really thick pieces. You can experiment. You may like the thickness of them, but Usually with cardstock, the 1/2 inch is plenty. So you just fold the cardstock in half, meet one of these little legs in the middle, and then the other one. So it's a little faster with the cardstock because you don't have as many folds to do, but you end up with the same size piece. And these can be mixed and matched in a project. Today we're going to be using just regular scrapbook paper, and these are cut 1 inch wide by 5 inches long, and I'm going to show you a way to conserve paper in a minute. These you do 1 fold lengthwise instead of with the thin paper we had to do an extra fold there. So this paper is a little bit stiffer than what you find in the junk mail that ends up in your mailbox. So once that's creased lengthwise, then you do the second fold like we did on the other pieces. And this is what we're going to be doing today on this project. So you still end up with the same size piece. So we're going to need 24 of these to make a ring like this. And that's what these baskets are made of. We're going to have 4 rings. Show you one that may show up a little bit better. There are going to be 4 rings going this way, and then you're going to have joining strips that are going to be passed through the basket to hold all those rings together. When you're choosing your colors for the basket, you have to keep in mind that when you cut a joining strip that's going to be passed through all these, you're going to be hiding this joining strip right here is going to be hiding the color that's underneath it. So you'll see in this basket I used all the same scrapbook sheet, and that sheet had multicolors on it. So I used 2 sheets of scrapbook paper, or I think it was 3 sheets for this one, and it was all the same sheet. And then I came back with a brown wood look to join those pieces together, so it gave me this alternating look. When I did this one, I wasn't sure what I was going to end up with until I got to the end. I did alternating rings of blue, pink, blue, and pink. And then when I used joining strips to join it together, my strips are going this way. This is a joining strip, this blue strip, and then this pink strip. So I used blue, pink to join it together. And I ended up with this little rickrack or zigzag look on the outside. So sometimes it's a surprise, you know, when you get done, or you can do the whole thing all the same color. So it's your choice. So just decide ahead of time which colors you want to use. I can get 28 pieces out of 1 sheet of scrapbook paper. So when you're trying to figure out how many sheets of every color that you need to buy, decide, you know, how many pieces you're going to need for each ring. So I need 24 4 times, and that's 96. So you can divide it up in whatever colors that you're going to use for each individual ring. So I've decided that I'm going to use a pink base for my basket. So I need one of these and one of the larger one. And then I'm going to do 2 rings in this paper. So I'm going to need almost 2 sheets to do that. And I don't have enough paper to do the rings for my second color and joining strips because I only have 2 sheets of the pink. So what I'll probably do is take 1 sheet of pink for the bottom ring and 1 sheet of pink for the top ring, and probably use a blue for my joining strips. So that, now that I've got those organized, then I'll know what I need to cut out. I'm going to set the blue aside for now because I'm going to cut all that I need for the rings. And I'm going to set this aside. So the way to conserve a 12-inch by 12-inch piece of cardstock or scrapbook paper, you can get 28 of the 1-inch by 5-inch pieces with very little waste if you first cut out a couple of 5-inch strips. So I'm just going to line that up with the 5, and I'm going to cut 5. So out of this piece I can get 12 of my 1-inch strips, and then I'll cut another one, and that'll give me 12 more. So now I've got this 2-inch wide piece that's 12 inches this way, and my strips are 5 inches, so I'll do 5-inch, 5-inch, and I'll have a little waste at the bottom. So I'm going to cut this remaining strip in half, and then cut those at 5 inches. So I only end up with this little piece left over, and that can be saved for paper beads or whatever. So what I do now, after I cut these 2 long strips into my little 5-inch pieces, then I can take these 5-inch wide pieces and turn them this way and cut out my 1-inch pieces. And so I'll end up with the same size as I was doing before. So I'll continue cutting these 5-inch pieces down into 1-inch strips so that I can get 28 pieces off of that one sheet. And I'm going to cut the ones I need for this printed paper and the solid ones. So again, you'll need 96 total, 24 pieces of the little 5x1 strips, 24 for each ring. Now for the joining strips, I need them to be at least 6 inches long. That would be the bare minimum, or 7 inches would be plenty to help you to attach the joining strips. And what I mean by that is once the joining strips are stuck into these little slots here, they're going to be taped down onto the inside. So you'll need a little bit around the bottom just to fold it over. And then that strip is going to come into, let me try to find one here. It's going to come all the way up through all those pieces, but you'll need enough at the top also to join them all together. So the strips, these strips are going to determine how tall you're going to be able to make your basket. If your strips aren't long enough, you're going to have to eliminate one of the rings and make your basket a little bit shorter. So I like to cut about 7 inches if I have enough paper. If I don't, I can get by with 6 inches for this particular project. So cut your 1-inch strips either 6 or 7 inches long. So I'm going to do mine out of the blue paper, and I need 12 strips. So I'm not going to be able to get 2 7-inch strips. So if I want to conserve paper, I can go ahead and make them 6 inches long, whatever you want to do. But I've got plenty of this blue paper, so I'm just going to cut the 1-inch strips out of this, and then I'll cut them down to the 7 inches after I get all 12 of these cut out. And that will be my joining strips. And I'll just turn this way, and then I'll cut it 7 inches. My ruler will extend here so that I can measure that out. One thing to consider when you're cutting your scrapbook paper for your joining strips, if you're using the 12 by 12 sheet that's you've set aside for your joining strips, if you cut off 5 inches off of the 12-inch strip, you can save the one for your joining strip and put aside the 5-inch one for later to use in another basket. You can go ahead and fold your 96 strips that you're going to use for the 4 rings. You can go ahead and do all of them at once if you want to do it that way. I do like to construct one ring, the bottom ring first, and go ahead and get that attached to the base so that it can all be drying and ready. And also it kind of gives you that satisfaction of seeing the basket start to take shape. And then usually what I'll do while I'm waiting for that to dry is I'll go ahead and just sit somewhere and fold the rest of my strips before I start joining. But I'm going to make one ring to begin with, so I'm going to count out 24 of these pink strips. All right, so that's my first ring. And just to review on how you fold the 1-inch wide strips, you just fold it in half lengthwise. And I'm realizing now that I'm working against this white table and it's kind of hard to see the fold. So let me lay this on here so you can see what I'm doing. Just fold it in half lengthwise. And use your little stick if you need to sharpen that. So that's that next crease, and then you fold that in like that. And the next leg, you fold that in. So I need to straighten up that little corner there. So that's your folded piece. So I need 24 for the first ring. So I'm going to go ahead and fold 24 of these. Okay, I'm folding my last of the 24 for the first ring. I'm going to go ahead and fold it as normal because I'm going to need these creases, but I'm going to leave this one off to the side for my last joining piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold it just like all the rest, and I'll have all my creases in place. But I'm just going to open it back out, and that'll let me know that's going to be my last piece. I'm just going to set it to the side. Now it's ready. We're ready to start joining the other pieces. And I will say, to make the circle join correctly, you have to have an even number of strips. It won't work with an odd number. If you're making the square basket, you'll have to have a multiple of 4 to make it work out for the 4 sides of the basket. So an even number for the round ones and a multiple of 4 for these square baskets. So to join, what we want to do is, you're looking at the little square or the little two-legged folded piece here, and you have this messy side where all of the raw edges are showing. And you'll also have that on the magazine pieces that you fold. You're going to have one edge that's not as neat as the others. The whole thing will join quicker and easier if you pay attention to where these nice clean edges are. You'll see this is where our fold is, and this is our clean edge. I'm going to call it clean edge, and this will be the messy edge. So you take 2 pieces and you find those 2 clean edges, and my legs, the little legs, are pointing in the same direction. And then I point them toward each other like this. The 2 clean edges are looking at each other this way. And then I'm going to make sure these are open a little bit here. You can also use your little wooden sticks to help open those. Orient them correctly. And then put one leg on each side of those 2 little slots. And then we're going to push it all the way through, but we're going to leave it up here. So what we're going to have is a messy edge here and a clean edge on this inside corner. So looking at this, this is our first strip. And the way, if you lay this down and go to lunch or whatever and come back, you're going to know this was your first one because it's going to look different from all the rest. It's not going to have these 2 little legs exposed. It's going to be a single one like this. Don't push this all the way in like that. You don't want 2 of these little legs sticking out. You want the first one to be pushed in like that. So let me take that out and show you again. You have the 2 finished edges facing each other like that, and then you poke the legs of one of them into the legs of the other, and I usually pinch it right here and push that all the way in, and it's going to remain at the top of these two little legs. Then I flip it over like this so that I now have these two little finished edges pointing out. So I can take the next one, and I've got the finished edge pointing toward the finished edge of this one, and then you poke that in there like that. And always on the top of this, you're going to see this messy edge. So turn it around to where you have your clean edge. It looks like an L. Take the next clean edge, poke it in there. Now it looks like a Z. Flip it over, you've got an L, clean edge. Now let me show you what happens if you take the messy edge and put it in there first. Now when you get ready to do the next one, you got all these little things to choose from, and you end up struggling to get your next piece in. So that's why it's important to pay attention to where this finished edge is and poke it in there like that. So I'm going to finish with the next this pile here. I'm going to have 23 of these joined together. Okay, I've got 23 put together, and I'll show you in a minute how you determine how big your base is going to be. So here is my first piece. If you lay this down, you get disoriented about what's your first piece and the last piece you put on. This is your first piece. It doesn't have the two little legs sticking out. This is my last piece. So if I need to take this apart, I can start from one end and take these out. So my last piece is going to have the two little legs. So I'm going to take that one that I left over, and I'm just going to fold it in half for now. I'm still going to look at this finished edge and poke it in to the same way we did the other. Sometimes it's easier to just stick one in and then the other, and then pull it all the way through. And then we're going to take, sometimes I have to look at it, we're going to take that and poke it through the top of this first piece. And that's why you got the messy side here on the inside. It's the only one that's different. But on the top side where you need it, it's got that clean edge. You put it into a circle. You take one leg at a time and poke it through each side of that end piece. Sometimes you got to recrease those folds and pull that all the way through. And now pay attention to how these little slots are, because that's going to make a difference later when we start joining them. You look at how the rest of these look. And if you're using cardstock, with this one, all I have to do is fold that up and tuck it inside like that. And it's going to look just like the rest. If you're folding cardstock, the wrong side of that cardstock is going to show, and it may be white or another color, so you're going to have to do something creative, like taking both legs and folding them over like that and then tucking them in. But for this one, I'm just going to fold one over and tuck it in. And then on the inside, I'm going to fold that one over. Hopefully you can see this on the camera. And tuck it in. Now this is the only one that's going to look different. It's going to have these two little rough edges there. The rest of them are tucked in like that. That's why you may choose to go ahead and fold the whole thing over and tuck them in, and it'll look more like these. But sometimes I end up joining them together this way or that way, and that would cause me problems. So for this one, I'm just going to leave it like that because it's not going to show once the next ring is put on. I do like to make a note of where that join is. I'll just put a marker on there like that, because when I get ready to join the ring, sometimes that little spot will give me trouble, and I like to know where it is. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and construct the base before I fold the rest of my rings, because as I mentioned before, I want to go ahead and let this base settle and let the glue settle before I start adding more rings to it. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and crease these one by one, and you'll see I have a little slot cut into each one of these. So we're going to pay attention to where those slots are. But do them in order so that they overlap in a spiral. Now, if you decided to do more than 24 on yours, you would measure the diameter as close as you can get it. Just lay it on a ruler. And this is about 3 1/4 inches across, and that's why I made the diameter of my circle 3 1/4. So when I did this piece here, I also made this middle part 3 1/4 inches, and then I added about 3/4 of an inch around for these fold-up tabs. They could be a little bit shorter, but this works pretty well for support. So I want to make sure they're all overlapping in the same direction. Because it makes a difference when you start gluing. All right, so now I can take this and put it down inside and work on a flat surface. And at first it's going to want to come back out, but once you start opening these tabs like this, they'll start behaving, and then your little basket will start taking shape. So what I'm going to... Okay, fold up all of your tabs in a little spiral around the edges. And the last one will be like overlapping both of them. And what I want to do is these little slots that are cut inside of here, right there, I want to line them up with these open spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and, working on a flat surface, I'm going to poke this down in there and then just kind of look. It's not going to want to stay in place right away. So if I just get the first one going, I'll be good. So I've got that kind of lined up, and hopefully you can see that inside there. If I can get under the camera a little bit. I've got this slot lined up, and I'm going to put a little glue. And then holding everything flat on the surface, I'm going to get this other one started and just pinch it for about 5 seconds or so. This tacky glue is really good about grabbing on. And I can go ahead and let go. And you can see that I have my little slot lined up with that open spot there. So the rest of these will behave once I get some glue on them, and I can start getting that basket in there. So I'm going to move on to the next tab. Since it's the way these are overlapping, you can decide which direction you can go without getting glue on the other pieces too soon. And just do one tab at a time, lining it up with the little open V at the bottom and holding it down to your work surface. And I'm going to do this all the way around. And the square one is a little trickier than this, but it's the same steps. And I want to say too that I decided to put my one that I have the mark on, I decided to put it to the top, because when I get ready to join, I don't want that here on the bottom edge where I have to fight with those little edges. It's not a big deal if you do, you can get it in there. So this one I'm going to move it a little bit because it's not wanting to line up again. Just maneuver it as you go around to get them lined up. And eventually it'll all shape out the way it's supposed to. Making sure it's all pushed down to the base. And I have a bad habit of pushing things in like that. You want to make sure it's not leaning toward the inside too much. And that will also help the tabs to end up in the right place. I like the longer tabs. They're easier to grab onto. But they don't have to be the 3/4 of an inch tall. You can make them a little shorter if you want to. I'm just kind of looking to make sure that my points aren't sticking out beyond the base. I'll move that. You can get some clothespins or whatever and pinch on there for a few seconds if you need a third hand. Just going to put my marker back on there. You have to watch out with wooden clothespins though, because the glue will stick to that wood. I'm just going to continue around till I get back to the beginning. Okay, I have one more left to do. Didn't take very long. You can also leave it just like that as a nice little tray to put on your desk, or you can just do 2 layers and make it as tall as you want it. All right, so the next step is we're going to start the joining strips. The joining strips need to be folded in half just one time, which I could have done all of those to begin with, so I'd have them ready. You can do it either way and fold as you go. I'm just going to crease that in the middle. And what I want to do is take one end, and you're going to be finding the slot that goes in that direction this way. You don't want to put it in right here because you'll have a gap there. It's not a big deal. You could glue it down if you wanted your strips going this way, but I like to just be consistent. And I also like to pay attention to where my folded edge is and do all of the strips exactly the same. So if I've got my folded edge going down like that, I'm going to continue that. Which you might want to do it upwards so that the folded strip, the finished edge will be toward the top of the basket. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference once the basket is complete, but and then this is going to go in the slot. Let's do it in the slot first. I'm skipping some steps here. Just slide it into the little slot, and right now you don't know what angle to get it in there. Just get it started, and then go ahead and sometimes I'll take this and I'll start curving it to make it easier for me to get it, and I'll hold it on the inside just to anchor it, and then I'll feed it into one of these little things like that, and I'm still holding on to it, and I want it angled up like this. So once I've got the angle correct, I can start creasing this. I can lay this down, turn it in the other direction so that it'll lay right. And you probably should let your glue dry a little bit at this point before you start messing with that, because I can feel some of this starting to let loose. But for the sake of just getting on with the project, I'll continue working. So just get that anchored in there, get it angled correctly. And once it's laying in the direction that it needs to go, right across there, you can get a piece of tape and just tape that down. And don't matter how ugly it is, because all that's going to be covered up. This is not 100% necessary, but I do like to take a little piece of double-sided tape. I don't like to use glue because I have had to go back and take these off, and the double-sided tape, it's not as permanent as the glue is, and I can change my mind if I need to. So just a little tiny piece, and don't put it too far to the top, just somewhere under there to hold that piece at the right angle. And I'm sure you can tell by this time where this is going. The next ring that we make is going to be put on in the same way. We're going to join the next rings onto that right there. This is not the correct ring, but just to kind of show you where I'm headed. And then you take the next one and you do this all the way around for all 12 pieces of your joining strip, and get them taped down and angled and secure and ready for the next ring. I'm just going to slide it into the next slot. I didn't fold that very well, so I'm going to turn that over. Actually, it is easier to go into the slot first. And then you can just start lengthening that. You want to make sure that you have enough length left over for the remaining rings. So don't leave it too long on the inside, because you don't want to try to put 4 rings on and only have enough joining strip for 3. So, but you need to have enough support on the inside. So I'm going to get my double-sided tape. This part is a little fiddly, but it's not too hard. I'm going to get my angle right first, get that where I want it, and then I can tape that one down. And then later, all of those are going to be covered up with that little base piece like that. Okay, I'm at my last strip that I have to join on here, and it's getting pretty funny looking now at this point. So there's my slot, and I'm still making sure that all my folds are going in the same direction. So I'm just going to poke this last one in there, push it through a little bit, and then slide it into the next channel. And then I like to lay it flat and then just kind of feed that through. You have to be careful when it starts folding up at the edge there, it could tear. So again, I don't want to leave too much on the inside because I want to make sure I have plenty of length to do the other rings. So once I get that in place, I'm going to stick a little piece of double-sided tape first to get the angle correct. And again, don't put it too close to the top because it'll make it hard to join the next rings on there. So I'm just going to stick that one down just to hold the angle in place and make sure that that's not crumpled right there. And then I can tape it on the inside. So I've got all 12 of my joining strips in place. And so now I can put some glue down in the bottom and put my little cover on. Sometimes I'll put a little message on the inside, or I'll write my name or who I'm giving it to. It doesn't matter. I just like to have fun with it. You don't need a whole lot of glue because this is not going to be exposed And it won't come out either because it's going to be pretty tight against the edges. So press that down, and now we can put this aside and start folding the strips for our remaining 3 rings. So go ahead and construct 3 more rings, and then we'll come back to joining them. And now I'm ready to join the last 3 rings onto the base that we started. You have to make sure that you have this joining area slotted in the right direction to where it's going to angle it the same way you started. You can do it either way, but you need to continue in whatever the first one is. You need all the rest of them angled the same way. If I turn it upside down, then my joining strips would be going in at this angle. So you want to make sure they're all going in the same direction. And the rest of this is pretty fast and easy. And I usually just kind of get it started a little bit for each one all the way around. Starts to look like a lantern about this time. All right, and then I just start slowly sliding these farther and farther down. I don't want to do it all at once because I've torn them doing that before. So just slowly work it till they start interlacing with each other. You want to where they're just barely seating inside there. You don't want to pull it so tightly that these will start, if you pull this too tight, these will start popping way down and start overlapping each other on the inside. So really all you want is them to be nesting on top of each other. And once they're seated like they need to be, then you can decide whether you want to put some double-sided tape underneath each one of these like we did before. I like to do that because they can start wobbling on the inside. These little scales will, I call them scales, these little points will start dropping down below the next area. So once I've got this seated the way I want, then I'll come back underneath each one of these and put a little piece of double-sided tape and stick that down all the way around before I start my next layer. Okay, I've got that whole area taped down. I have one more to do. And then I'll put my next ring on, and I'm going to put another one of these print ones on. So I'm going to do the next 2 rings exactly like the one I just did. And then I'll come back when I'm finished with the last ring and show you how to finish up the top edge. All right, I have plenty left over to work with. If I would have cut this to 6 inches instead of the 7, I would have only had just a little piece to work with, and that's fine too if you're real careful in the bottom, but at least I didn't have to worry about it so much when I was gluing on the inside. But these do need to be trimmed back because it's going to be almost impossible to tuck that in. So I'll usually trim them back about a 1/2 inch from the top. Okay, I usually just eyeball it. I don't have to measure. I just want to have enough to fold in, so I'm just going to cut off. Go on this side where I can see better. So I'm cutting off about 3/4 of an inch, about a 1/2 inch. So you can see that if I would have only allowed 6 inches, it would have been a struggle to get that folded just right. So if you have plenty of paper, you don't have to worry about it if you go ahead and cut them 7 inches. All right, so when you get to the end, all you have to do is tuck this in down into the middle there. You don't have to glue it or anything like that. It'll stay. You just go around the whole top and tuck all of them in. Sometimes I use my popsicle stick to help me, or I'll crease it first to help it curl a little bit. So there's the completed basket. And the bottom is nice and finished. I don't have a link set up just yet to share the cut file for the Silhouette cutter or the Cricut. I can add this later to have a link so you can download the cut file, the SVG file, so you can use it with your cutter so that you can cut out these 2 pieces. They can be resized if you're planning on making a bigger one. The only thing that would not probably come out correct is if you resize this larger, these edges will also get larger, so you'd have to take that into consideration when you're changing the size of these.